So as a way to introduce ourselves, we have two slides just so you know who we are. This is Dr. Lesley Mayne, and I will be presenting Dr. Sharon Rogers. If you don't know Sharon Rogers, she is just an absolute champion of AAC. She's an author, a professor, an international presenter, and a practitioner. A typical conversation with Sharon goes something like this. Hey, Sharon, what are you up to? And she'll say, oh, I'm presenting AAC with the International Society of Augmentative and Alternative Communication, along with the World Health Organization in Spain. And I would just say, well, of course you are, because why wouldn't you be doing that? So while she is a retired professor, slowing her down is pretty much impossible, and we are all the beneficiary of her work, of the children, the parents, and professionals as well. So she is an absolute treasure, and I hope you enjoy listening to everything she has to say, because she's a remarkable individual.
Thanks, Lesley. You are a jewel, and she's a much-valued adjunct faculty member at California State University, Fullerton, where she teaches augmentative alternative communication. She takes great delight in engaging students with complex communication needs and in developing their participation. She's much sought after by parents and administrators in the public schools. As of 2013, California Speech Language Hearing Association recipient of the Outstanding Achievement Award, she's my best and favorite communication partner, bringing energy and enthusiasm and much skill to our social and academic interactions.
So basically, in summary, we have a really good time together working on AAC. And what motivated us to get started with talking about AAC is there are many books out there, and there's a lot of articles out there, and there's a lot of great information, finally, available for AAC. But how do you kind of put it all together, and how do you make it work? So we sat down and tried to make it small. We sort of failed in making it small. But we got it down to these 5 categories. So what you have this opportunity to see is 5 webinars today, getting started. Then on May 9th, we'll be heading into building fundamentals, and we're going to go through what each of those are all about. I wanted to give a great big thank you to Gloria Olson at Ablenet for their free professional development. It's just outstanding. They're an industry leader in technology, and then on top of that, they provide these wonderful webinars to everyone, and we just want to say a great big thank you. So for getting started, we're looking at establishing participation. What's happening for the child now? What can we do to elicit participation? Maybe find things that already exist, and what can we do to build? In building fundamentals, we'll be looking at expanding communication participation. So if we had one way or one word to communicate, what can we do to move towards maybe 2 to 4 ways to communicate, or 2 to 4 words to communicate? What can we do to expand that? In making connections on May 21st, we'll be looking at how the child is succeeding, but what can we do to support that? Still growing, still putting pieces together, but the child is starting to see, hey, I'm making a difference here, and I can do that, and maybe support is still required, but good things are happening. And then on June 4th, we'll be looking at bridging skills, which is really moving towards independence with participation, having success in certain contexts, like, say, a structured play situation, maybe a little bit less adult support, but we're starting to put some pieces together. And finally, June 25th, we'll be looking at maximizing participation. And while we're talking about independence, we're also talking about children. So, of course, learning is still occurring, and we'll be facilitating that, but we're maybe backing off as that adult model and helping encourage that level of independence. So the scope for today, for getting started, just so you have an idea of what we're talking about, is we're looking at the beginning stages of participation for the child and the communication partner. With AAC, it's not just sort of that language test that we've been going for, but how is that going to operate? How is the technology going to operate? How is it going to work with social interaction skills? How do we put all that together? And oftentimes, the communication partner is just as big a part as the child. So we want to take a look at that. Then we'll be looking at establishing purpose and meaning to gestures and vocalizations, discovering new ways to communicate by exploring all of our modes, so listening, reading, writing, and speaking, even for that getting started child. And getting started doesn't have to just be children. You might have an adolescent who maybe just hasn't had that exposure to AAC yet, and sometimes even adults who have just not had that exposure. So this doesn't just have to be an infant or a young child. It's really anybody who's getting started. And then we'll look at using tools to develop and express language. One little guy that I work with, when we're looking at ways, and we sort of see our adult role as us providing that model of what we're looking for communication, but sometimes the student will show us, or the child will show us a mode of communication. So, for example, I was working on a finger squeeze for a student, and one day the student started to splay his fingers instead as a way of confirming something he wanted to do. And I didn't teach him that. He taught me that as a mode of communication. So let's always be open. It was a great lesson, always to be open. And then on other days, you might have maybe a motor-based issue where the hand squeeze doesn't work, but maybe the voice is working that day. Or maybe we have access through technology through a foot or something like that. So you always want to be multimodal and open.
And you lead to success.
Yeah. So, and when we're talking about tools, we'll probably be talking about tools from a technology perspective as well as a physical perspective and actual, ways you can use your body as a tool as well as technology. So our agenda, what was I supposed to do? We have switches now. We have some technology, but what was it I was supposed to do? So we're going to look at social interaction. We're going to look at skills and activities. We're going to look at teachable suggestions for facilitators, beginning literacy skills, how do you choose that vocabulary, and then we're going to get to the tools and access methods, and troubleshooting, which will look two different ways. We'll look at technology, but in getting started, sometimes we're looking at lower tech, but not necessarily. And we'll also look at, best laid plans. The technology is there. Your therapy plan is ready. Your intervention in the schools is ready. You as a parent have it all ready to go, and then it doesn't work. Okay, so what can we do to help you with that? So that's our agenda for today.
We believe that developing participation begins with social interaction, because it's having fun with others and belonging. And this interaction is crucial to cognitive and emotional development. We see AAC as a way to discover expressive language like never before. Pictures, print, and voice output. We mean that students with complex communication needs and ourselves to engage in socially and meaningful real-life experiences. Why are we developing participation? Well, children with complex communication needs are wired for social interaction. Authentic communication with AAC is motivating, it causes action, it's a way of expressing the child's unique identity, it transfers information, it yields an emotional response for the child and the communication partner, it shows that they belong, and it's just a lot of fun. So to head into a little bit of theory about what has guided us for our practice is the great work of Janice Light. And her work originated in 1988-89 and has just continued on. It's just fantastic resources for us. So what Janice Light has to say about social interaction is something we pretty much already know, but is that it's relative and dynamic to this interaction, and we need it to be functional, we need to have that adequate communication, sufficient knowledge, skills, judgment in 4 areas. So these are her 4 purposes for communication, and we want to take a look at this really as a framework for what you can do to choose how you want to move forward with the child that you're working with. So we're looking at social closeness. We're going to get into more in the next slides what those really mean, but we're looking at social closeness. How is this child demonstrating social needs? Information transfer. I have knowledge, and I want you to know what I know. Social etiquette, basic social greetings, hello, goodbyes, how's that being done? And then wants and needs. Wants and needs was placed last, although on many lists you might see it first. And the reason we put it last is just so that it highlights the importance of using and giving that child the opportunity to express social closeness and information transfer, especially. Oftentimes, it's just flat out easier to use wants and needs because we initially give that child that connection and that huge that they haven't had before. And we think we're helping, and that's a wonderful thing to do. The other concern with wants and needs, or what makes it easy to target, is that it's usually easily identifiable in icons. We have
a picture of a toy. We have a picture of their favorite food. We have a picture of all their preferences. But 80% of language is not well represented in icons, and we need to find a way to keep our eye on that communication prize, that it's about that interaction. So what words, what symbols can we use, what actions can we add to the child's repertoire to encourage social closeness, information transfer, and the social etiquette, in addition to wants and needs. So I'm definitely not saying wants and needs aren't a priority. You're going to hear about it more later today and how we look at it. But just keep in mind, for a complete framework, we want to include that social closeness, information transfer, and social etiquette. When we talk about relativity, it's always great to go to our dear Albert Einstein, who says, if you put your hand on a hot stove for a minute, it seems like an hour. Sit with a pretty girl for an hour, and it seems like a minute. That's relativity. So it's all relative, and we relish in our successes with the kids, no matter how small or big they are, and everything is absolutely relative. So to take a little deeper look at what we're talking about with the social closeness and what does that mean to you in helping your child or children communicate, is to look at social closeness. What can you talk about? We're talking about establishing, maintaining, and developing relationships, and that's really where the interaction is. One way to look at that is through expressions of sympathy, jokes, love, and joy. It's not always love and joy. Sometimes it's go away. I want to be alone right now, or no, you're wrong. So it doesn't always have to be all positive, but because kids need the opportunity to say no as much as they need to express
right on.
Means of being a part of things. So this isn't exactly a getting started story, but when I mentioned that you could include jokes, research shows that adults, when they're trying to establish relationships with others who use AAC, they found that using a joke helped other people sort of understand, I can make a connection with you, just like you, just like me. So sometimes giving a joke is a good way to break the ice, and everybody kind of tries to do that, find that way to break the ice. For another little boy that I work with, he had a joke or a fact of the day on his communication device. And the child went from not really having a whole lot of interaction on the playground to kids coming up to him saying, what's your joke of the day? What's your fact of the day?
Wow.
And it was only a 2-button hit. It was, do you want to hear my interesting fact of the day? And as soon as the kids were like, yes, we want to hear, he would play his fact or his joke, and he had an interaction where he never had interaction before. So while I know it's not exactly getting started, and you'll probably hear this story again as we move through these other webinars, but I just think it highlights that importance of social closeness and sharing that information, and created a social experience that you wouldn't have otherwise. And just another little final push for the changing purposes of communication. You see it in this slide. Sorry, it's not perfect, but in infancy, when we're looking at the priorities, the wants and needs is pretty high in that infant stage, as well as social closeness, and less so with information transfer, but they're itty-bitty, and they're not quite sure what they're needing yet. It's being taken care of for them. As you move into the elementary stage, wants and needs goes down a little bit. Social closeness gets a little bigger, as does social etiquette and transfer, and then finally you can see in the secondary, wants and needs go down quite a bit, usually because they have a degree of greater independence in working with their wants and needs. But look at the priority that's placed on that information transfer. So we're in school now. We want to tell you what we know. We want to have that social etiquette and the ability to demonstrate social closeness.
So how children spontaneously start and respond to communication is termed unaided, but capacities for social interaction blossom. From that very first smile by 4.5 months, when that emerges, the child begins to vocalize and make long eye-to-eye contact. Children look at people and their faces and their movements. Their attention goes to differences in colors and sounds around them. You see a look that you can quantify, and then you know that child's attending, and there is an awareness. Yet studies have shown that staff working with children with complex communication needs only respond about 1 out of 6 times that the kiddos hope to get the conversation started. So to aid us as the adults in the children's environment, we're introducing switches that make stuffed animals walk, or make a fan spin around, or get music to play. And They can even have speech-generating devices that allows the child to say hi or ask for help or ask for more. We call this aided, added to the to enable the child with complex communication needs to be an effective communication partner.
Right. So when, and in your mindset now, okay, we have our purposes of communication, and now let's look at all the different ways that the child is expressing. So make a list. Are they using their eyes? How are they using their eyes? Are they smiling? How are they using their smile? Now, you got to be careful with smile, right? Because sometimes it could just be gas. Which I've had a child that, you know, he would smile wonderfully, but it had nothing to do with communication. He just felt a whole lot better. So is the smile functional, purposeful? Can the smile be used as a confirmation, kind of an on-command thing, or is it really more of a social? So you kind of want to regulate and know what that smile really means. So are they using their hands? And then we're talking about the aided, where it's that introduction of switches. So it's a little of both. So what are they doing, and where do you see opportunities to jump on opportunities for them to communicate? So that's where we'd like your attention to go with that.
What skills and activities can we use to get started? Well, adults and children alike look for everyday activities that lead to success.
Yes, so take what you would think and naturally do with any child, and we're just going to be communicating a different way. And we'll help you through with the language, but that's sort of what we'd really like you to walk home with. We just presented at CASHA and brought in a bunch of toys, a full table of toys. And everybody looked at it and thought, well, that doesn't look any different. And that was the exact point. You're playing with the same toys. You're doing the same thing. We just need to get the language in the place where it needs to be for success.
We build on what the child's already doing, using his eyes to pay attention or his smile to engage in something that's mutually satisfying, and like having somebody pick you up. And talk to the child about what you're doing, like playing peekaboo. You can say, I see you, and cover your face. I can't see you. Where am I? And then with a quick surprise, boo, they love surprises as you uncover your face. So you build in just regular routines, but have a chance to interpret how they're explaining that they'd enjoy that experience. Blow a bubble. I see you looking at the bubbles. You like bubbles? Do you want me to blow more? Well, look for that smile to say yes, or hand to reach for the bubbles, and then you do blow more. These are activities that everybody uses, and they're fun.
Let's go on a walkabout. This is one of my favorite activities to do with a getting started child. If you get permission from the parents, if you happen to be doing a home therapy situation, or if you're in a school, you can kind of take advantage of maybe the play area around the school. But what I like to do is get my sessions outside of the clinic or outside of the therapy room or outside of the classroom. I find a single switch or a dual switch, and we'll show you switches later, and you can program either the one or the two switches with two simple messages: go and stop. Now, it doesn't have to just be go and stop. It could be, I want to go outside, I want to touch that leaf, or let's keep walking. So what we do is that I would explain to the child that we're going for a walk, and they're in charge of where we go, and that's where the go and stop comes in. Those two words are a great place to start because it causes action upon somebody else. We'll get to the wants and needs of their favorite preferences, but boy, when a child learns that they've made an impact, that they can control you, that they can control their environment, what an eye-opening opportunity for them to say, whoa, this communication stuff works. This is good. So a little reminder, though, if you do go outside, think about, are there any sensitivities? Are there to skin? So do you have lotion on? Are there eye sensitivity to light? So do you need a hat, sunglasses, protective wear? Just think about that as you head out. If everything's fine, then great. But I just love this interaction. It can take me 45 minutes to an hour to go one block and back, but boy, what a success to have a child learn that they say go, that we go, and when they say stop, we stop. Or if, hey, I want to touch a leaf, we touch that leaf, if it's on the ground, we don't take it off of nature, but if nature has let go of it, we take that leaf and I'll tape it onto a piece of paper and write down what it is, and then the child can use it for texture if they're low vision. We can talk about the textures, we can talk about sizes, because you can feel and see sizes if it's not a low vision. Rocks can be smooth or bumpy, so you can get a lot of language exposure going as well. So it's one of my favorite things to do, is to take kids outside and go on a walkabout.
Well, we know that participation is in the context of their everyday life, like going for a real walk. And I love this slide that's from the CAN Center for Disability Research up in Hamilton, Ontario. Actually, the large green button kind of looks like a speech-generating device from Ablenet that we call a Big Mac. It has a single message on it that you can put a lot of information that is really accessible, and away we go.
Yeah, so we thought that was great, because it looked like a Big Mac.
But what is participation? Participation in context establishes friendships, which is wonderful, and it develops skills and competencies, and expresses their creativity, as you can hear, achieve mental and physical health, and determine meaning and purpose in life. So children need these real-life experiences with other children, too. The participation needs to be in a meaning-filled context of everyday life and people.
So here are some teachable skills and suggestions for facilitators. Since we talked at the beginning how important the facilitator is in the developing of communication and participation, we just thought it would be great just to provide a few tips. So one important tip is to interpret and describe the child's modes of communications to others, because while we're doing great with identifying, they're using their eyes to communicate this, they're using their hands to access the switch, they're using speech-generating device to express certain types of messages, other people need to know what those successes are as well. And when they feel a part of the situation, when they feel a part of the communication and what helps the child be successful, their wall comes down, that they can communicate with this child too.
And we can ask the parents what ways they found most effective with their child, and spread that good word around.
Right. So I think the more we can expose everyone to the successful interactions and types of communication modes, the more everyone will embrace AAC, because I think there's that tendency to think, oh, just the speech therapist over there does AAC twice a week for 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah,
No.
I don't think so.
We need everybody on board and everybody to feel comfortable about what that means and how they can be successful. Then we're going to look at acknowledging and expanding the child's expressions verbally or using speech-generating devices. So AAC does not just have to be a technology, a tool, a physical tool. It is really about what they're saying verbally. It's pretty common for some children may not have any verbalizations, but some will, or have word approximations. And those are just as worthy and important. It's all a part of successful communication. So what works?
If you're swinging, and the child wants to have more swinging, you work out a signal that he wants more swinging, and then you give him a big push.
Yes, I tried to attach a switch to a swing once, and that didn't quite work.
Oh, darn.
Maybe that's another Ablenet tool. There you go. Ablenet, can you make swing chains that have a switch on them? And that would be fantastic. All right, so then modeling the use of sign language, gestures, and speech-generating device communication. So basically, okay, we have our modes. Let's make sure we're modeling them and using them. Also with the child, too, because when they see your success and your messages, that helps the child say, oh, I can do that, too. And then identify opportunities with families to determine times and types of communication, because that's the other trick. Okay, I know how the switch works, and I've got the child, and I maybe have, but when do I do this?
Yeah,
and it doesn't have to be this manufactured time. Okay, I'm going to do my bubbles now, or I'm going to do Mr. Potato Head now. It can be, everybody hopefully wakes up.
There you go.
You've got your getting dressed routine, you have your meal routine, your bath routine. How can you add in communication?
Or even a friend comes over and you can say hi as you greet them at the door, or welcome to my birthday party, whatever. Make it simple.
Okay. One thing that I do with little guys is I frequently use an iPad which we'll get to in a little bit as well, and do choral productions when we talk about modeling. So I will work on my iPad while another student works on their iPad, and they can see how I am putting messages together, or in this case it's getting started, so creating one message, and the child has that modeling opportunity. All right. So now, while we're doing all our modeling, and that's really wonderful, I want to talk to you about natural consequences. It's really a theory of natural consequences, which is simple enough in how it's going to sound, but sometimes the follow-through can be a little tough. So the theory of natural consequences says if a child makes a request or states an utterance, that whatever was said you follow through with. And that sounds all fine and dandy until you actually get into the practice of it. And then the child makes a request, and you are quite sure that they didn't mean that they really meant they wanted the ball. They really didn't want the tissue. They really wanted the ball. But they asked for the tissue.
Mm-hmm.
And you really want to give them that ball.
Yeah.
But you can't.
No.
What you do is you give them that tissue, and when they look at you in that state of confusion but you know what I wanted, you provide them with another opportunity. So follow through with what the child communicates, and then provide them as soon as you can. If you feel like there's going to be a behavior issue, as soon as you can, provide that next opportunity, and you can help facilitate that. But just really, it's important that the child knows that their communication matters, that it makes a difference, because as kids get a little older and move beyond the getting started stage, they might learn that, hey, I made this request, but nobody really followed through anyway because they gave me what they thought I wanted, so I guess maybe it doesn't matter quite as much.
I don't think so, no.
So there isn't the same motivation. And it's not necessarily always a behavioral thing. It can be just a motivation. I'm not highly motivated to make requests because everything for me is taken care of anyway. You know, it's a highly physically involved child. So it's really showing them that their communication matters, but follow through with that next opportunity.
So, literacy skills. Do we do that? Are we supposed to do literacy? Or does somebody else do that?
It just happened to me.
Oh, is that right?
Yep,
I'm
just
so
happened
sorry.
to me 2 weeks ago.
Oh.
I had somebody come in with me into therapy with another therapist, and she's right in front of the child. First of all, said, "Does he do anything?" And then, by the way, this child throughout the whole session, as he was using his single switch, nonverbal, can barely move, would look over at, every time he would hit the switch, he would look at that person. Like, did you see that?
Did you notice that? I do something.
Yeah.
That's right,
So
exactly.
You just pay attention.
That's right.
Anyway, we're talking about literacy, but yes, we do literacy.
That's right. And literacy, speaking, reading, writing are overlapping spirals of experience with language. And so language pours in with our ears, our eyes, our mouths, our hands, and language of everyday experiences are looking for restaurants, looking for ice cream places as they travel around. All of those are, that's all language. For children getting started using AAC, interaction literacy means attaching meaning to symbols, like a wave, a gesture, a word, even a picture. Children with complex communication needs will use all of these forms and vital forms of language.
And then when you think about AAC, what we're asking a child to do with it, not necessarily our unaided, but when we're headed to aided communication, we're talking about symbols.
Yes, we are.
And that's literacy. That is
exactly.
literacy. It's a literacy skill, is reading and understanding that this symbol means an intended outcome.
That's exactly. So literacy skills are the ability to read and write in any given language, and our American Speech and Hearing Association says it's also achieving one's goals and developing one's knowledge and potential. So David Yoder from North Carolina wrote that people are not too anything, not too mentally retarded, not too physically impaired, not too emotionally challenged to learn to acquire communicative competence or to learn to read and write. So we need to believe that and do everything in our power to view literacy process through the lens of the child's role, to listen and see the patterns of letters and words, and the adult role, to read and write and model the importance of written language, yet breaking down the patterns with the child so that reading makes sense. Here you see the child's role of listening, and we know that 50 to 90% of the children who use AAC do not have functional literacy skills. But other investigators suggest that maybe only a fraction of what the child needs to learn to read and write is being taught. Dawn Prince Hughes is a person with a diagnosis of autism, and she said she must write to connect with people. Written English is my first language, she writes, and spoken English is my second. For AAC users, literacy is primary. So you can go to YouTube and view a video on how to easily transform any book into a Switch accessible audio book like the one that's shown here. And you can find ways in which Janice has a whole teaching curriculum on teaching literacy that gets to all those pieces that a child needs.
Yes, so if you Google the Janice Light, Penn State University, you can get to that webinar, which is fantastic, and it's free as well. So the Ablenet Bookworm, you should go see the video because it's very intuitive, wonderful tool.
And to get started, you can use photos and photos with print, and photos with people in them doing activities starts the best conversations. And let the child make a choice about which books to read, or which with or without print. The child loves listening to stories, the same story again and again. In my son's college graduation, when they honored Dr. Seuss, all of these very sophisticated seniors began repeating, "We do not like green eggs and ham. We do not like them, Sam I am." That pattern of words had stuck for 16 years, so it's worth repeating. So observe and interact with objects paired with word labels. The chair the child sits in with the chair and with his name on it, the photograph of mom and dad and siblings, pets with their names printed, and finally give the child colored markers, pens, crayons with adapted grips and paper to scribble and write, and then you write with their name with the same markers and pens and point out that pattern of words and letters. It's a wonderfully creative process.
One little guy that I work with has very low physical movement opportunities, but we do art projects all the time, and even though it's fully motored, he'll make choices about what picture he wants to draw. So do you want to draw the sun or a tree or whatever it is, and we'll make an entire scene, and he smiles the whole time because he would love to be able to do this. He has the language and the ideas, but not necessarily the physical movement. So we do it. So feel free to add that into your repertoire. It's great fun for you. It's great fun for the child, and makes this great connection. And you can make choices about which pictures you want to draw. And
on the iPad, you can photograph those and come back to them the next time and see if that really still makes sense to you.
So once again, we're going to cycle back to the adult role in literacy. We talked about AAC being a dual partner situation. Actually, it's more than just a partnership. It's a whole bunch of people. But just some tips. We can think about accommodating processing demands by providing shorter phrases and sentences. Of course, children need to hear the flow of language, so that standard reading and conversation is really important. But if we're talking about wanting a child to understand a specific word or a specific concept, maybe we bring that down. We reduce the rate. We emphasize that keyword that's on the page. Show the child print all around their world and how it is around their world. And again, you can point out concepts of color, shape, and size. Those are great things to start with little guys. And then another option is to take the text of a book. Say you've got a children's book that you particularly love, but there is maybe a paragraph of information, and that might be too much on a particular day, or you want to highlight that concept. So write out what your target is. You can actually physically tape it into the book, or you can have it separate from the book, but sometimes it's nice for the child to see something that they can access. You know, you can even label the pictures and tape them right on. It doesn't have to be a high-tech thing. It can be a low-tech thing, assuming it's your book. I guess there's that one.
There you go. Sorry about that, library.
Or ask the library to order another so you can adapt and modify the book that works for you. So again, you're going to judge that reading and flow and gauge what you think your child is absorbing and expose away accordingly. So now let's take a quick look back at communication in just regards to literacy. We're going to take a look at how the child is communicating. All right, so we know all this is important, and we're going to expose, and we're going to give a lot of reading, and then we're going to focus that reading to accommodate processing demands. But how are we going to actually get to that communication again? So let's take a quick step back. Determine the access method. So there's how is this communication being demonstrated? Is it a direct select with a finger, meaning they're pointing to different things? Are they maybe using a stylus? There is such a thing, as long as the stylus touches the skin, a child can use a stylus. I have a child who uses a handcuff, and we put the stylus within the handcuff, and then the child can still select because they don't have the finger dexterity, but do have the gross motor arm dexterity. So that's something to keep in mind. Can you find a way around? If you don't have fine motor for direct select, can you do an arm with a stylus? A head pointer is an option. Head pointers can be tricky, and there are different head pointers out there, but that's another access method. Is eye gaze an option, or are we looking at switch access?
By the way, we've got a chat here that wonders if you can get a copy of the presentation, and you can get copies of this within about 3 days after the presentation is over, and then you can refer back to any of these slides.
And then you're going to take a look at what's working and what can I try next. You're constantly looking, being on lookout for what's happening. As soon as the little guy I started working with started moving his feet, went, oh, he's moving. Here's an opportunity for a switch. I went and found a switch so fast, I put it down to his foot, I Velcroed it to the wheelchair, and here we go. Movement is communication. That is what I say. And so I'm working with PTs and OTs to see what they do to maximize participation, maximize movement to get to communication. So what's working? What can you try next? And what did the child teach or show me? Again, remember I told you I was working on a hand squeeze with one child. That's an unaided form of communication. And he gave me a hand slice, so the fingers went straight away instead of in towards his palm. It's like, fantastic, you know? You just taught me a way that you can communicate that's easier than the squeeze. Fine, wonderful. I still work on the squeeze because I think it's a good way to go, but I take his splays when he gives me a splay. And then circle back to social interaction. What behaviors do you observe the child expressing their connection to the story, to the activity, and the communication partner? Sometimes that might be a longer eye gaze on a page where you notice, oh, they're looking at the page. I'm going to give them a chance to kind of process what they see. And sometimes they'll be quiet for a few minutes, heaven forbid, and give them a chance to explore what they're looking at. And after I've talked about all the topics or concepts I was targeting on that page, I'll give him a moment. And then when he's ready and looks away or looks at me, then I know that we're ready to move on. All right, so now we're going to head into vocabulary, which I know there's two things you really want to know, which is vocabulary and tools, and those are coming up. I think our tools follow vocabulary. All right, so we just thought this slide was great. It's we gave a reference, so whoever just made it is honored there. So you can see AAC, and the SGDs, by the way, stands for Speech Generating Device. And we just like this flow of vocabulary that says, you know what, you have access to language. Literacy, the ability to read and write in a given language. Language that is culturally or geographically agreed upon set of rules for communication. So we have words and we have a flow of interactions. So we just thought this was a nice model. So when we come to choosing vocabulary, we decided to put the vocabulary back into the purposes of communication so that you can have an idea of, okay, am I targeting these 4 purposes of communication for the child? It won't be, you may not have words for every single area if you're just getting started, but we wanted to give you some ideas of ways to go. So if we're looking at social closeness, maybe you have people's names, and you may not want to go too far, but you know, you can do mom and dad, caregivers, siblings, and action words. make sure you include the action words. Here we have, for social closeness, hug and go away. Remember, we want to provide opportunities for kids to not just have the good stuff, but if they're feeling frustrated and need ways to say no, then that's a good thing too. Information transfer. Again, words that cause action. Now, you're seeing here, we have phrases. Knock the blocks down. Build the blocks again. Okay? We're giving concepts, and you can put that on a single switch. I'll do that with my getting started guys because they see the response. They see what's going on. Am I teaching those individual words? No, I'm teaching the idea that this language is causing an action.
There you go.
So there's kind of two different philosophies there. Are you going for teaching that specific word? Are you teaching that interaction and communication? So there's you kind of decide what it is your priority is. And then social etiquette, you've got your hellos and goodbyes. But if we are talking about an older child, you want to do what's appropriate. We weren't really even sure if what's up is still appropriate, but or hey, or whatever it is. So what social etiquette is appropriate to the child at the time. And then wants and needs, that still absolutely should be there. Favorite toys, books, foods, anything that is most relevant to that child.
We talk about core words, like being the core of an apple, the things that hold our language together, and those are the basic ones that we use all the time. Then we have the fringe words. I kind of call them the peel words, because they're the outside of the apple that really appeals to you. That would be the favorite toy, the favorite book, the favorite person that they want to be with. They appeal to the person's unique individual experiences. And people's names and nicknames, restaurant names, names of pets, Kim, Taco, Toto, any of those are just a way to refer to the kinds of words that are included in the basic vocabulary.
Yeah, Sharon came up with the whole appeal thing in the course. She emailed me, I have a great idea! And then, of course, I'm writing this slide, and I had written fridge words for a while. That's why we have editing. But the fridge words sort of work because you have your preferred items that are in the fridge. Right?
That's right, exactly.
So, exactly. But, you can think about this like from the child's perspective who wants a certain action figure. So if this action figure or something generic is on the slide or on the communication board, that's fine. But what if they really wanted the Buzz Lightyear with his action belt?
With the action belt, that's whole different.
That is a very specific need. So that's where the fringe word comes in, rather than I just want my action figure, which would be maybe a core word, or the fringe, not fridge, but fringe words, which are very specific. I want a taco versus I want to go to Taco Deli.
That's right, exactly.
Okay.
Gale von Tatenhove has a gold mine of resources free for downloading. Just go to this website, and there are vocabulary lists of top words used by toddlers. That's the group we're thinking of getting started as soon as possible. Clinical application, a place to start. All done. Different. Help. Mine. More. No, not. Don't. Stop that. Want. What? Those are some basic ones that we can go with.
All right, and then we head into some technology. I love this page because it has a nice array of the Ablenet switches that can be used, including the single switches and environmental controls. So we love using the tools. So when we're looking at tools, we're also looking at tools and access methods. We want multimodal. One way doesn't get it done. So what are your unaided? How's your body moving? Write all of them down, practice all of them, okay? And then communication boards. So what types of symbols are we talking about? Are we looking at Mayor Johnson? Are we looking at Boardmaker? Are we looking at symbol sticks? So there's two different ways you can think about practice. There's the therapeutic communication practice, meaning you want them to, within a session, show you all their unaided ways. And you can say, okay, you just showed me with eye gaze that you want to do that. Tell me with your speech-generating device. Tell me with your switch. Okay? Tell me with your hand squeeze. Okay? Tell me with your body posture. Tell me, so you're going for as many ways the child can communicate. That is a therapeutic model. But with a parent, maybe it's really about acknowledging that intent. Okay? When it gets back to those natural consequences, if the child demonstrated, showed you, spoke to you that this is what they wanted, okay, follow-through.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that different model, and you may want to talk to families about that. Having their practice time of show me one way, show me two ways, show me three ways. After a while, my kids look at me like, okay, are you done? Because I push. So know that difference, and then tell parents, okay, the rest of the day, when they express it, you're on your way. Now, there is an argument that high-tech should be used immediately. And the arguments are valid that you shouldn't just start with a switch and maybe you should go straight to a high-tech communication device, even for getting started. And I think if you're looking at really strong comprehension, emerging skills, and you're seeing a lot of these skills going really quickly, maybe you look into consulting an AAC high-tech vendor to explore those options. I like starting with switches just to make sure that we're on our way. But there is that argument that you say, no, we're going straight to high-tech. And another quote from Albert Einstein, who says that imagination is more important than knowledge. And when I think I like this because it just said, keep exploring all the options, keep looking. You're not making things up, but you're looking for opportunities.
And they will happen.
Yes. So then, as far as our symbol options, these are just a basic review of different symbols. You can look at real objects that represent another object, a partial object, a miniature object, a photograph. So all these are different ways that symbols can be represented. What you see on your screen is a golden retriever. I have a golden retriever. I call him 1/3 dog, 1/3 cat, and 1/3 carpet. And then around the border of this are different activities or things you can do with your dog. And then we head into some visual scenes.
Yeah, we know that young children require a language faster when it's in context. When they're learning the label for a bed or a chair or door, if it's in the context of a room, that makes better sense to them than just an isolated picture. And the hot spots are places that you can record messages under, say, the television set to say, I want to watch television, or the spot on the bed that says, good night, I'll see you in the morning. Or probably the one that's in the closet is the speech-generating device that has a little message that says, I want another drink of water. Well, get it out of the closets, because they will make that request, and we just need to honor that. So some say that visual scenes are too complex, but others say no, the context required. So it's a child-to-child kind of decision. And we'll talk about low-tech visual scenes and speech-generating devices.
There's a great comment. Let's see if we can get back to, can you scroll up?
Yes, sure.
There's a great comment. Go down. It says, one participant said, one child I know has a symbol that says not that, and she uses it when people misunderstand her or put words in her mouth that are wrong, okay, which is a great thing.
Absolutely.
Great thing.
Absolutely. And there are several authorities on visual scenes that talk about interaction and environmental context. They say it's easier for children 2.5 years to learn and to use, and children with developmental disabilities take more social turns when they use a visual scene display. So participating in that interaction, learning more easily, and taking more turns, those are all important factors we want to use in getting started.
So here's a sampling of some Ablenet switches, including the Big Mac switch, which is like this standard, industry standard that we love to use. The dual switch, I call it a dual switch, but it's iTalk 2. I love to have it for having two messages, and then some environmental controls to play with toys, which is just huge. I love the battery adapter option that can be added to the switch and toys. Here are 3 apps that I like to use with my Getting Started kids. One is Sounding Board, which is free by Ablenet. You can program 1 to 9 symbols. Obviously, if we're getting started, we're looking at 1 to maybe up to 4, which is really a fantastic, again, tool that Ablenet provides to anyone. It's amazing. I love the yes/no answers HD. It's a binary option. It can be free or $3.99. You go just fine with the free one. Some people will say, oh, no, but my child can say yes, no. And that might be true, but you can program the 6 different messages to have 2 icons. So it is a huge app. I love to have that one.
You can say, I like it, I don't like it, whatever.
It can be all sorts of things. And then another one is the tap speak button. It can serve as a single switch, and then they have different levels, which can also have symbols on them. Another great tool is the TalkTrac from Ablenet. I love this because it's a small little speech generating device that's worn on the wrist. You can have 2 to 4 messages. You see here there's actually quite a bit of text. I had just simple messages, yes, no, hello, goodbye. It can be small, short messages on the wrist talker. I think it's an amazing tool.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to, is this not the cutest face? And then a quote from John Wooden, who was called the UCLA Wizard of Westwood. He won 10 NC2A basketball championships in 12 years, and his coaching methods have been studied extensively by all sorts of professionals. Anyway, he says, don't let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. And I just absolutely love that. Just always be on the lookout. Always keep looking.
Both you and your kid can do it.
Mm-hmm. And then we head into our troubleshooting, and I told you we'll look at a couple different ways. One is linguistic variations. So we've talked about reducing language input to the child. You can pause a little bit more, which again can be tricky because we want to tend to fill that space. So provide some more pausing so the child can communicate. You might need to pause not just for the language, but for motor planning. And then another huge one is to give more and or different life experiences, because it's hard to communicate or to have that motivation to communicate if you haven't been able to get out and have a variety of life experiences. And then change the voice options. I have one little guy who, when I change the voice to comic, like a comic character,
right.
I get more language out of him when I do that than when I keep it in a regular voice. It's hilarious what he will do. So, and if you can, use the speech generating devices and program children's voices. That's a great, great option.
The technical skill and physical skills, such as forming the correct hand shape or manual signs, pointing or touching buttons on the speech-generating devices, may or may not work. But if in doubt, check the batteries. The very best speech-generating devices sometimes get accidentally left on, and therefore we need to keep a small stock of batteries handy to replace them. Go to view the YouTube tutorials available on the use of speech-generating devices at the vendors, and ask Google or keep the manual for easy reference. Teach others to program the speech-generating devices. Sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, babysitters, teachers. Programming is an enabling skill and anyone's privilege. Encourage the child and yourself that I'll help you to say more. And at the end of the session, praise the child and yourself for what you did right and how it worked.
Yes, I know it seems obvious to talk about batteries. Why did they even bother saying anything about batteries?
There you
go.
But
you know how many times the batteries have run out and they're just not there. So I know it seems obvious, but just keep a supply.
And it's not your fault, and it's not the kid's fault.
It happens.
It happens.
Oh, I had
right.
one little boy whose speech-generating device audio would go wonky. It'd make a funny sound. He thought that was the funniest thing ever, that his voice was all of a sudden just crazy sounding because the batteries were dying.
So making communication fun. If I'm having fun, the child's having fun. And you know that this is a wonderful way to enjoy communication together and your new child's absolute skills. We'll see you back for Part 2, Building Fundamentals, and Part 3 for Connections, and 4 and 5 for Bridging Skills and Maximizing Potential. Some of you may actually want more complex forms of communication and are ready to go for that. We want to go there, too, with you, as the communication is so important for all of us.
Yes, so we can't wait. It's actually next week. Next Thursday is our next
May the
webinar.
9th,
so
that's right.
We shall see you there. Well, at least we'll hear you there, or actually you'll hear us, because we won't see or hear you. But anyway, we look forward to speaking to you next week. And then there's just 2 more slides here that just lets you know that
after the session, a short survey will appear on your screen after the meeting starts. Please tell us how we're doing. We'll listen to that and make our next presentation include some of those very important tips. There's a schedule of live webinars for assistive technology and curriculum Solutions at Ablenet University, a vast library of archived recorded webinars, and the website that you can go to. Don't forget that those are great resources. And thank you all for attending. We've enjoyed having this chance to get started. Thank you so much.